So page 155, starting with Seeing as How Welch. Seeing as how Welch was our new home, Brian and I figured we'd make the best of it. Dad had shown us the spot near the house where we were going to put the foundation and basement for the glass castle. He'd measured it off and marked it with stakes and string. Since Dad was hardly ever home, he was out making contacts and investigating the UMW, he told us. He never got around to breaking ground. Brian and I decided to help. We found a shovel and a pickaxe at an abandoned farm and spent just about every free minute digging a hole. We knew we had to dig it big and deep. No point in building a good house unless you put down the right foundation, Dad always said. It was hard work, but after a month, we dug a hole deep enough for us to disappear in. Even though we hadn't squared the edges or smoothed the floor, we were still pretty darn proud of ourselves. Once Dad had poured the foundation, we could help him on the frame. But since we couldn't afford to pay the town's trash collection fee, our garbage was really piling up. One day, Dad told us to dump it down the hole. But that's for the glass castle, I said. It's a temporary measure, Dad told me. He explained that he was going to hire a truck to cart garbage to the dump all at once. But he never got around to that either. And as Brian and I watched, the hole for the glass castle's foundation slowly filled with garbage. Around that time, probably because of all the garbage, a big, nasty river rat took up residence at 93 Little Hobart Street. I first saw him in the sugar bowl. This rat was too big to fit in any ordinary sugar bowl, but since Mom had a powerful sweet tooth, putting at least 8 teaspoons in a cup of tea, we kept our sugar in a punch bowl on the kitchen table. The rat was not just eating the sugar. He was bathing in it, wallowing in it, positively luxuriating in it. His flickering tail hanging over the side of the bowl, flinging sugar across the table. When I saw him, I froze, then backed out of the kitchen. I told Brian, and we opened the kitchen door cautiously. The rat had climbed out of the sugar bowl and leaped up onto the stove. We could see his teeth marks on a pile of potatoes, our dinner, on a plate on the stove. Brian threw the cast iron skillet at the rat. It hit him and clanged on the floor. But instead of fleeing, the rat hissed at us as if we were the intruders. We ran out of the kitchen, slammed the door, and stuffed the rags in the gap beneath it. That night, Maureen, who was 5, was too terrified to sleep. She kept on saying that the rat was coming to get her. She could hear it creeping nearer and nearer. I told her to stop being such a wuss. I really do hear the rat, she said. I think he's close to me. I told her she was letting fear get the best of her, and since this was one of those times that we had electricity, I turned on the light to prove it. There, crouched on Maureen's lavender blanket, a few inches away from her face, was the rat. She screamed and pushed off her covers, and the rat jumped to the floor. I got a broom and tried to hit the rat with a handle, but it dodged me. Brian grabbed a baseball bat, and we maneuvered it, hissing and snapping, into a corner. Our dog, Tinkle, the part Jack Russell Terrier who had followed Brian home one day, caught the rat in its jaws and banged it on the floor until it was dead. When Mom ran into the room, Tinkle was strutting around all pumped up like the proud beast slayer that he was. Mom said she felt a little sorry for the rats. Rats need to eat too, she pointed out. Even though it was dead, it deserved a name, she went on, so she christened it Rufus. Brian, who had read that primitive warriors placed the body parts of their victims on stakes to scare off their enemies, hung Rufus by the tail from a poplar tree in the front of our house the next morning. That afternoon, we heard the sound of gunshots. Mr. Freeman, who lived next door, had seen the rat hanging upside down. Rufus was so big, Mr. Freeman thought he was a possum and went and got his hunting rifle and blew him clean away. There was nothing left of Rufus but a mangled piece of tail. After the Rufus incident, I slept with a baseball bat in my bed. Brian slept with a machete in his. Maureen could barely sleep at all. She kept dreaming she was being eaten by rats, and she used every excuse she could to spend the night at friends' houses. Mom and Dad shrugged off the Rufus incident. They told us that we had done battle with a fiercer adversary in the past, and we would again someday. What are we going to do about the garbage pit, I asked. It's almost filled up. Enlarge it, Mom said. We can't keep dumping garbage out there, I said. What are people going to think? Life's too short to worry about what other people think, Mom said. And anyway, they should accept us for who we are. I was convinced that people might be more accepting of us if we made an effort to improve the way 93 Little Hobart Street looked. There were plenty of things we could do. I felt that would cost almost nothing. Some people around Welch cut tires into 2 semicircles, painted them white, and used them as edging for their gardens. Maybe we couldn't afford to build the glass castle yet, but certainly we could put painted tires around the front of our yard to spruce it up. It would make us fit in a little bit, I pleaded with Mom. It sure would, Mom said. But when it came to Welch, she had no interest in fitting in. I'd rather have a yard filled with genuine garbage than trashy lawn ornaments. I kept looking for other ways to make improvements. One day, Dad brought home a 5-gallon can of house paint left over from some job he worked on. The next morning, I pried the can open. It was nearly full of bright yellow paint. Dad had bought some paintbrushes home too. A layer of yellow paint, I realized, would completely transform our dingy gray house. It would look as if, at least from the outside, almost like the houses other people lived in. I was so excited by the prospect of living in a perky yellow home that I could barely sleep that night. I got up early the next day and tied my hair back, ready to begin the house painting. If we all work together, we can get it done in a day or two, I told everyone. But Dad said 93 Little Hobart Street was such a dump that we shouldn't waste time or energy on it, that we could be devoting to the glass castle. Mom said she thought bright yellow houses were tacky. Brian and Lori said that we didn't have ladders or scaffolding that we needed. Dad was making no visible progress on the glass castle, and I knew that the can of yellow paint would sit on the porch unless I did the job myself. I'd borrow a ladder, or I'd make one, I decided. I was certain that once everyone saw the amazing transformation of the house begin, they'd all join in. Out on the porch, I opened the can and stirred with a stick. The color of buttercups had turned creamy. I dipped in a fat brush and spread the paint along the old clapboard siding in long, smooth strokes. It went on bright and glossy and looked even better than I had hoped. I started on the far side of the porch around the door that went into the kitchen, and in a few hours I'd covered everything that could be reached from the porch. Parts of the front were still unpainted, and so were the sides, but I had used less than a quarter of the paint. If everyone else helped, we could paint all the areas I couldn't reach, and in no time we would have a cheerful yellow house. But neither Mom, nor Dad, nor Brian, nor Lori, nor Maureen was impressed. So part of the front of the house is yellow now, Lori said. That's really going to turn things around for us. I was going to have to finish the job myself. I tried to make a ladder from bits of scrap wood, but it kept collapsing whenever I put my weight on it. I was still trying to build a sturdy ladder when during a cold snap a few days later, my can of paint froze solid. When it got warm enough for the paint to thaw, I opened the can. During the freeze, the chemicals had separated, and the once smooth liquid was as lumpy and runny as curdled milk. I stirred it as hard as I could and kept stirring even after I knew the paint was ruined, because I also knew that we'd never get more, and instead of freshly painted yellow house or even a dingy gray one, we now had a weird looking half-finished patch job, one that announced to the world that people inside the house wanted to fix it up but lacked the gumption to get the work done. All right, so I'm going to stop reading there and stop recording.